Did you know that your investment strategy can be the difference between struggling in retirement or thriving in it? If you're a Washington State employee, you have many unique investment options available to you. Let me show you how to use them. So the first investment decision that every state employee has to make within the first 90 days is which pension plan you want to be on. Now, some jobs don't give you this option. If you're a police officer, firefighter, left to the only option you have, that's what you're going to be on. If you're working for a school district, you may have the option to choose between a Plan 2 retirement system or a Plan 3 retirement system. So depending on who your employer is, you're going to have a potential decision to make within 90 days of employment. And if you don't make one, they have a default option for you and you can't change it after you've been defaulted onto one. So even though you're just started off and you're probably busy with work and trying to get the hang of things, this is a really critical timeline that you're on, as this investment on which pension you want to pick is really going to determine how your retirement looks in the long run or how much guaranteed income you're going to have. People argue for Plan 2 or Plan 3 on both sides, but the thing you need to make sure of here is to do the work and decide on which pension is going to be best for you. You need to take the time to make the decision because you don't want to be the person that looks back 20 years from now and be like, man, I wish I would have went with the other pension system just because I didn't take the time to understand the benefits. Now, I've gone through Plan 2 and Plan 3 many times on this channel. I'll link a video here if you guys are just struggling with that decision so you can go through it and at least receive some more education on the topic before making this lifelong decision. Now, the second thing you guys are going to have is your deferred compensation plan or a 403B, depending on who your employer is. Now, deferred comp in many cases is an optional retirement savings account for you guys to put more money away too. The biggest mistake I see people make, especially those in Plan 2, is they strictly rely on their pension plans. All they do is fund their pension plans and that's it. They don't ever take the time to put more money away. They think the pension is going to be enough to take care of them. In many cases, people on Plan 2 that work lifelong plus Social Security, yeah, you're probably going to make close to, if not more than your salary just with those two strategies. But living paycheck to paycheck in retirement probably isn't what you want to have in mind. If things come up above and beyond what you're going to earn that month, you probably want to have some type of savings to dip into, not to mention vacations and traveling and all the other stuff. So having savings is a really critical part. So deferred comp and 403B are going to give you those options to save into. Now, deferred comp can be done on a pre-tax side or now a Roth side. It's your choice on which way you want to go with. The skinny on it is if you go pre-tax, you're choosing to defer your taxes. So don't tax me now, tax me later. Roth is you're going to tax me now. Any growth I get is tax free. Now, which strategy you choose is completely dependent on your situation, where your future retirement looks like, what your tax outlook is like. I know for many state employees, when you do the math on it, if you take just your estimated pension you expect to make in retirement plus Social Security and see where that lands you on a tax scale, in many cases, people are still in the same tax bracket. Even though they're making less, they're maybe on the lower end of that tax bracket, but they're still in the same bracket, which means any additional dollar they were to pull out is taxed the same rate. So if you're taxed at the same rate now versus in retirement, it's a wash, doesn't really matter which way you go with. But if taxes were to increase in a way, that's where a Roth strategy would come in place. Because I paid it now, let's say 22% rate, let's say retirement, I'm still in the 22% bracket, but then the government decides to change it to 25%. Now, if I were to take pre-tax money out, I got paid 25%. If I invested in Roth the whole time when I was in the 22% bracket, now I can pull that money out tax-free. Doesn't matter if taxes say 25% or 30% and I got away with paying 22 while I was working, I pay my fair share along the way. On the flip side of that, for those that are making a lot of money and we are going to be making so much less retirement that maybe we are changing brackets in a way, maybe it does make sense to do more pre-tax assets. Remember, we save on a pre-tax basis, we're lowering our income. So we're telling the government, hey, don't tax me on this money I'm putting towards my retirement. You can tax me on it later. So for example, if I'm making $200,000 a year and I say I'm going to max out the deferred comp, I'm going to put $30,000 in there. Instead of being taxed on the full $200,000, I'm going to be taxed on at $170,000. That $30,000 I put in there doesn't see any taxes. All that money goes in to the investment account and begins to grow for me. Keep in mind that you still owe money on that $30,000 plus any interest it earns over the long run. So this isn't a tax deduction or tax credit. It's a tax deferral. It's, hey, I'll pay you later. And what you're hoping for in this scenario is down the road that if taxes are lower or you're making so much less that you are in a lower tax bracket, you might come out ahead because taxes are going to be lower in retirement than it is now. Now, we don't know which way the taxes are ever going to go, but that's kind of what you're banking on if you're using pre-tax investments. Now, keep in mind that you don't have to make a decision of one way or the other. You can always do both as long as you're under the annual limit. So deferred comp has a $30,000 limit if you're over the age of 50. You could do all 30 to Roth, all 30 to pre-tax, split it half and half if you want. The key here is you just can't go over the $30,000 total between the two sides. Now, outside of this, what many state employees use is something like a Roth IRA. So IRA is an individual retirement account. You set this up on your own. It does not go through your employer. Therefore, it can be funded with any money that you have in your bank account. Deferred comp has to be funded with money from payroll. Same with 403Bs. IRAs, because they're individual, you fund it with your own money. And once you've paid taxes and it's in your bank account, that money can go into the Roth at that point. You've already paid your taxes, nothing extra you have to do. And you can make those contributions on a monthly basis or kind of just whenever you want. There's no timeline or something you set up. So you can make irregular contributions. You can wait to the very end of the year to make them. It's really flexible on how you fund those. You just have to stay under the limit. Currently $7,000 for those under 50 and at $8,000 if you're over the age of 50. Those are going to be the main accounts or structures that you're going to use for retirement planning if you're here in Washington State. Now, those are not strategies by any means. They're just the accounts. They're the shell or the house that where the investment strategy is going to take place, where your investments are going to be in there. So if someone asks, what's your investment? Say I have a Roth IRA, that's nothing. That's just like an empty shell. What's in there is what really matters, right? Another way to think of it is think of these retirement accounts as just a brand new house that's completely unfurnished or an apartment building completely unfurnished. While they may look the same on the outside, it's what inside them that counts or makes one look better than the other. So you can have two apartment buildings, one be completely empty or have like a couch and a TV, and one fully furnished and decorated beautifully. You know, they're very different things. The same thing is when you look at retirement accounts, it's what's inside that really makes or breaks them, not necessarily the shell itself, although having the right structure does help. All right, so let's move on to the actual investment portions here. So in most cases, a lot of people are either in mutual funds or ETFs. So by people in Plan 3, you have funds going into mutual funds within Washington State. There's not a lot of investment options here. You got your slew of target date funds, and you have like 7 individual fund options. These are mutual funds, fairly low cost, not as cheap as you can get if you bought them privately, but considering the tax savings that you get within, it's a pretty good deal overall. Now, when it comes to choosing which individual funds, this is where your own judgment and personal retirement time is going to come into play. Some people like to be on the safer side because they don't like seeing the market fluctuate. Other people are more aggressive, and I've seen the benefit of being aggressive and how much they've earned, and they continue to do that. The part with those people is they find it hard to dial back, to take their foot off the gas pedal, so to speak, and go into bonds, because bonds don't return much, is not as sexy, and they don't really like that. So your investment strategy is going to be tailored towards your own personal preference. The key thing is when you're picking investments, you need to look at what's inside them. So if you have XYZ fund, what is that fund actually invested in? Again, ETF, all it is a collection of different stock positions. If you're trying to invest in one, knowing that you have just an ETF, you have more than just one fund there. It actually owns various companies. So one common one that a lot of people will recommend is something that tracks the S&P 500. And I'm not going to throw any ticker symbols out there, but there's one inside Washington State, Deferred Comp, and on Plan 3, tracks S&P 500. A lot of people are in the assumption that when I get S&P 500, it's going to track the index, and I actually own 500 companies. And while the truth is you have exposure to them, you don't own them evenly. The majority of gains in the S&P 500 comes from the top 7 holders, and they're all in the tech sector for the most part. So even though you have the S&P 500 and may perform well in most years, and that's what people really determine the success or will benchmark portfolios to, you may have more exposure in certain categories than others. While S&P 500 is great, it's always good to have other options. You don't want to miss out on what's happening overseas in the international markets. You also don't want to miss out on the small and mid-cap companies, because those small companies, they may only be worth, a few $1 million or so. They have a lot more room to grow. Whereas like the big established companies, they're going to grow consistently, but at this point, they're just so big, the chances of them doubling in the next, 2-3 years probably is going to happen. They'll double over time, but it's not going to be that explosive growth. So they're more the steady earners. So it's good to have some money there, but don't be afraid to put money in other categories to reap the rewards of quicker growth potential. Now, if you need actually help choosing what funds inside of Plan 3 Deferred Comp, I actually have a system that I put together where I personally built out portfolios for people. It doesn't matter if you want to go 100% on the risk side, if you're more of a moderate investor or you're more conservative. I have different portfolios built out for each one. Now, in each of those categories, I have 2 options. I have the strategic model, which rebalances every single quarter, and I have one that's called tactical. Tactical is more active investing. The theory is if you can time the market swings correctly, you can outperform those that just buy and hold and ride all the waves. So there's 2 trains of thought on which way you want to go. For most people, I say go with the strategic one. If you buy and hold, while you're going to have the roller coasters on it, it's a lot more hands-off. You get more of your time back. You're not so worried about missing out on it. Studies shown that if you miss just like the top 5 days in the market, your returns are absolutely cut in half. So buying and holding, usually the best way to go. Now, there are some that like the tactical aspect. So if you want to know like, hey, when should we go to cash and re-enter, we can do that too. So for example, just a few days ago, we issued the alert of anyone that's in our tactical models to move about half their money into cash. Now we track a couple of different market indicators. When 2 of the 3 flash red and they stay red for 3 or more days, we tend to raise cash. And when they go back to green and we had an all clear signal, we'll deploy back in. Now the last time our system did this was back in February of 2022, before the market did dive and we saw that 20% correction. So we'll see where 2025 leads us. But if there are some of you that want to take the active role and you're willing to risk, missing out a few days just to avoid a potential market downturn, that's where tactical investing comes into play. Strategy you can do on your own, but if you want a system that does it automatically for you, you don't have to think about it, check your inbox, you see the email and you make the moves, that's where our system does. I'll link that down below. But that's the difference between more of a passive income style and more active. Now, 3 investment mistakes you need to avoid if you want to have a successful retirement are going to be relying too much on your pension, being too conservative, and not adjusting for investments as you get closer to retirement. So mistake 1 we talked about a little bit, but if all you're doing is focusing on your pension, you're banking that your pension is going to pay you 30% of your income or 60% of your income, and you don't need to save elsewhere, that I've seen far too many times, and it ain't pretty. While you're not at the risk of running out of money because it's all guaranteed income, having to live paycheck to paycheck just isn't fun. They typically aren't the happiest people in retirement from what I've seen personally, just because they do have to still kind of, not necessarily scrimp, but they do have to worry about saving and seeing if they have enough cash to do what they want this month. So they just can't really live the life that they really want to because they don't have that pot of money to dip into and take up on a trip or do things that they want, get the car that they need, because they are still kind of essentially on a fixed budget. So nothing wrong with pension, but make sure you're saving above and beyond that. Mistake number 2, being too conservative. So being too conservative with your investments, it's kind of like if you got on I-90 and you just start headed, either west or east, depending where you're at here, and you're going to go for a 3-hour drive. Let's say you're going from, like Yakima to Seattle. If you did that and you were only at 25 miles an hour, you'd get there, but it would take forever. Plus, you'd be a risk to other drivers around you. Same thing is true when you're too conservative with your investments. If all your money is sitting in cash, like in the bank, or it's locked up in CDs, and you think, oh, this is safe, I'm not going to lose it because FDIC insured, and I get a fixed interest rate, and this is great, you're really risking your retirement there because you're not really growing. For example, if you got a CD and let's say it was paying 5%, great, you get 5% per year. But you still got to pay taxes on that. So let's say the government takes a chunk of it. Oh, and then there's inflation of about 3%. So we take 3% or more, you're earning about 1% or so. At that rate, it takes you 72 years to double your money. So you want to make sure that while it is going to have some safe money, we don't want to have too much of it. There's, just like most things, in moderation is okay. If we are way too conservative, that's just dangerous. And people that I've seen run out of money, I haven't seen anyone run out of money because the market dumped on them. They've run out of money because they made poor investment decisions, like being too conservative, or they just wanted to be debt free and they withdrew money, paid a bunch of taxes just to buy depreciating assets or lock money into a home, then that's it. So being too conservative is a real risk, and I'd say it's probably even riskier than being invested in the market. Our mistake number 3 that we often see is not adjusting in your investments as you close retirement. So just last week I had someone come in, they love being in the stock market, they love their stock picks and watching it grow over the years. They look at the bonds and they know they should be in them, but bonds haven't been great. They've actually lost money most of the last 5 years. They just really aren't happening anymore. So his question was, do I really need to invest in that? If I have a pension that's going to cover most of my income, I have Social Security, do I really need bonds in my portfolio, or am I okay just to stay in equities? Now, when I looked a little deeper at it, he was still a little bit short from a cash flow standpoint, so we did need the portfolio to generate some. So I told him, only put enough into bonds that you need to generate the income that you want. So I always say, on 5 years of income on hand, I have about 3 years of whatever income is in bonds. Everything else will be put into equities. So he was happy with that response because it was a small portion of his portfolio that I told him to put into bonds. Most, probably like 85% of his portfolio was still in equities. Now, remember when I say equities, that just means it's more growth oriented. There's different degrees of equities. There are some, like in individual stock, that are going to have really big roller coasters. You got index funds that will go up and down, but to a lesser degree, and they also produce less returns. And then you have even lower risk ETFs that are invested in more bond models and stuff. So they're considered equity still, but inside of them, they might have bonds or more conservative assets in them. So those are all examples of different equity positions you can have. Not equities are the same. So it is important to adjust investments as you get closer, but you may not need as big of an adjustment as you think because you guys have pension Social Security. It is something that is on a case-by-case basis. So it's something you do want to dive into sooner rather than later. Waiting until the year before retirement to make these moves may not be the best bet, especially if you have a big market correction. You're not going to have the time to make that money back up. So all in all, the best way to think about your retirement as a Washington State employee is to think of your plan as like building a house. Your pension, that's your solid foundation. It's guaranteed income. That's your floor. You're not going to go below that. And you need a strong foundation for retirement. You guys have that with the pension. Social Security also falls in that boat. So your foundation alone is going to be stronger than most people out there, because most people still don't have the same level of guaranteed income that you guys do. So solid foundation is good, but you need more of that, right? You can't just live on a concrete slab. So that's where your savings comes in. So things like Plan 3, Deferred Comp, 403Bs, those are your walls. They offer you added structure and strength to your overall plan. But you still can't live in that either, because you need a roof to keep the weather out. And that's where things like a Roth IRA comes into place, or any type of Roth account, because what it's going to do is provide protection from unexpected tax storms. So if you can have your Social Security and your pension as your foundation, you have savings in Deferred Comp, Plan 3, 403Bs, and you have some type of Roth account, and no matter what comes your way, you're going to have a way to shelter yourself from potential financial storms. Taxes go through the roof, great, I got my Roth. Taxes fall down, great, I'll take it from my pre-tax assets instead. Inflation starts going out of control, my investments are probably going to increase in value, because those companies that are now increasing their price because of inflation, you're going to reap the benefits as a shareholder. So you can, in a way, make it back through your investment strategies. If you're too conservative, remember that if inflation comes up and it goes higher, it's going to really erode things that don't have market exposure to them. So it's always good to have some type of risk and market exposure in your retirement accounts, no matter how old you are. If you want more video content just like this, be sure to join my free school community. I have exclusive content there just for community members. So click on the link below. I'll see you guys in there. And always remember that your future depends on what you do today.